Michael Shellenberger is a Time magazine hero of the environment and Green Book Award winner. He is also a frequent contributor to the New York Times, Washington Post, Wall Street Journal, Scientific American and other publications. He's also a regular guest here on Outsiders. I'm delighted to have him back, and I'm going to have to apologise, Rita says, for putting words into your mouth. Hello and welcome back to Outsiders, Michael Shellenberger. How are you? He's frozen. Sorry.
Oh,
okay,
no.
That's technology. There you go, technology. So we'll get Michael in a second. Maybe he was frozen because of my putting the wrong words in his
fainting outrageously. I mean, one of the things I admire about him is that though he is obsessed about the climate, well, he's devoted his career to it, 20 years, and he's got the Environmental Progress organisation, but he's honest. He knows that renewables aren't going to dramatically reduce emissions unless you're going to destroy everyone's living standards. So he's saying that nuclear is the only way you can do that.
But Rita, one of the things that we're going to be talking to Mike about when we get him back on is about all of the scare stories around koalas and all sorts of things like that. And I just wanted to talk about this event real briefly that happened down in the Shoalhaven, south of Sydney. There was going to be a charity event that was going to raise money for koalas and bushfires. And the idea was you could cuddle a koala and you could pay some money to make a donation, and in return you get to have a go with a koala. And what happened? Well, our friends of the Loony Left Animal Justice Party protested, and the event got canceled. So well done, guys.
Yeah,
you stopped people from cuddling a koala, and you lost them a bunch of donations for a good cause. So well done, guys.
There we go. Fantastic. Now we've got Michael Shellenberger back. Michael Shellenberger, how are you?
Good. Sorry about that.
No problem.
You guys are a long ways away.
Now, Michael, I'm in trouble with Rita because I said that I misquoted the headline of your most recent article, which is "Why Everything They Say About Climate Change is Wrong." And I said it as "Why Everything They Say About Climate Change is Rubbish." But, of course, you are a climate change believer, but you believe the solutions are wrong. Now, talk to us about your latest article, Michael. And I also want to quiz you about the bushfires, which you know a lot about.
Yeah, well, thanks for asking. Well, of course, we saw supposedly the koalas were functionally extinct. That's what one of our main climate activists said last week. I looked it up by going to the main scientific source. There's around 300,000 koala in Australia. There's no risk of them going extinct. In fact, the species is not even endangered. And I just kind of kept digging, in part because, you know, my daughter is 14. A lot of her friends are very concerned about climate change. I believe climate change is real, but I don't think it's the end of the world. So I wrote this piece to just sort of say, hey, let's keep our heads screwed on straight and let's separate myth from fact. And the fact is that humans have become much less vulnerable to natural disasters over the last 100 years. I note that the peak of natural disaster deaths in 1931, 3 million people died. In last year, 11,000 died. So we've had a decline of 99.7% fatalities from natural disasters. So again, I believe that humans are contributing to climate change. I just think we shouldn't exaggerate and attribute things to climate change that are attributable to other factors.
So taking us through how much you think climate change is anthropogenic, or I guess you mean carbon dioxide is contributing to climate change. You mentioned your daughter. The thing that we see time and time again is that kids are literally being told that we are approaching the end of life. Human life, mass extinctions, our children are being taught in schools and even on television programs, public education and so on, that it's all over, it's all finished. And unless we stop mining coal now, we're doomed. Is that analysis correct?
Well, yeah, I mean, I point out that there's this new environmental group in England called Extinction Rebellion, and the whole idea of the group is that global warming threatens human extinction. It's total nonsense. The spokesperson said that billions of people will die. There is no reputable scientific organization that has ever said that. She said that life on Earth is dying. That's not true. We still have incredible biodiversity on Earth. And as somebody that cares about wild animals, about endangered species, I think it's really important that we don't tell people that they should give up hope, because there's still a lot of beautiful things to fight for. I think what we've done here is that people have brought a religious apocalyptic view onto a problem that is one that we can manage, both by adaptation, but also by continuing to move towards cleaner sources of energy, from natural gas to uranium, from natural gas to uranium. All of these are up the energy ladder. And in terms of coal, I mean, what I point out in the piece, and I actually quote a climate scientist on this, is that what bothers me is that people are using climate change to try to deprive poor countries like India and sub-Saharan African countries of the energy they need so they don't have to burn wood and dung for energy anymore. We should all support a humanist approach to this problem, not one that tries to keep 2.5 billion people stuck in poverty.
James.
Michael, I was intrigued by what you said about it there being a religious element to that, and I think, a lot of people have observed that there's something that pretty much maps closely to a lot of Christian religion about sin and redemption here. But I also wonder, when I look at Extinction Rebellion, and I've covered some of the protests here, and I've talked to some of their people, really what I find, though, it's not just about the religion, but it's about the economics. And they seem to be very, very keen, Michael, to use the climate really not so much to save the climate, but as a lever to overthrow the current economic order and replace it with something socialist, revolutionary, that sort of thing, which, of course, makes people more poor. But it seems to be sometimes, I think, with some of these about really not so much the environment, but about the politics, and the environment is a convenient excuse to create the revolutionary conditions they're looking for.
Yeah, that's definitely the case. I mean, I think what happened is, after World War II, people became very wealthy in capitalist democracies, and that created a problem for socialists and Marxists and others who had a very revolutionary criticism of capitalism. Remember, the idea was that everybody would get poorer under capitalism. So when everybody got wealthier, I think the more radical intellectuals and others had to go find some other reason to be against capitalism. And what they ended up finding was the environment. And that, in some ways, was much easier, because you just blame all sorts of problems on capitalism. The truth is that one of the ways that humans save nature is through technological innovation and economic growth. It's what allows us to not have to use wood and dung as our primary sources of energy. It's what allows us to use to go to the supermarket to buy our food and not have to hunt wild animals, to be able to protect special places. All of these things are made possible by growth. And so I agree that the agenda of degrowth or of socialism is really, I think, an abuse of trying to solve real environmental problems.
Rita?
Now, you mentioned your daughter, and in your piece you noted that psychologists are saying that children are suffering from anxiety in enormous numbers because of climate change and the fears around climate change. How would you, as a parent, counter that? You obviously believe in climate change. So what do you say to your daughter so she's not stressed out about what's going to happen in her future?
Yeah, I mean, I say to her really what I said in the piece, is that climate change is happening. It's something that humans are contributing to. It's something that we will solve by moving towards cleaner sources of energy. Really, all that matters is going from wood and coal to natural gas. That's the energy progress that we need. But there's no risk that she and her friends are going to be hurt by this. In fact, people in wealthy countries are going to be the safest. And that if we want to help people in poor countries, then what they need is economic growth and economic development. People want to be able to live in the cities. They need to use a lot of energy. And so I think it's good for people to have concern and compassion for people around the world, and also for wildlife. But I think that this apocalyptic politics, the kind of the radicalism, is really quite counterproductive and doesn't help anybody.
Michael Shellenberger, your organisation, Environmental Progress, has worked with some of the world's leading climate scientists. You've prevented carbon emissions from rising. You've helped prevent emissions increasing by the equivalent of about 24 million cars, taking them off the road. So you're definitely put your money where your mouth is, and your action is laudable, and your science is what makes it so interesting. So thank you so much, Michael Shellenberger, for speaking to us again on Outsiders. Have a great Christmas, mate.
Thank you, you too.